today we have our two female presidents here in this record. All right?
Afterwards. Good.
Yes, Yasmin and Elizabeth.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
153 years.
Okay, thank you, Chris, for that warm welcome, and thank you, everybody, for taking the time to attend my presentation here today. I'm going to talk about ethnobotany, and so you'll first ask the question, well, what is ethnobotany? It is really a branch of ethnoecology, which studies the local people interacting with aspects of the natural environment, such as animals and plants, celestial bodies, moon and stars. You know, agriculturists traditionally would use the moon when to plant this and when not to plant. So you have that ethno-astrology part, landscape, forests, etc., soils. Therefore, to go into ethnobotany or any of those skills, you need a multidisciplinary team to do your field work with your local communities. And it can involve quite a range of expertise to work together. So between October 2007 and July 2008, an ethnobotanical study of the medicinal plants of Trinidad. This was conducted with with a multidisciplinary team from U.W.I. It involved Professor Yuri Clement. He was a pharmacologist in the Department of Paraclinical Science, U.W.I. Professor Compton Seaforth. Some of you may have attended his lectures if you were on campus in the 70s and the 80s, or even the 90s. Then he became adjunct professor at UTT and head of the Herbal Institute at UTT in his retirement. He passed away, sadly, in 2018. And then, of course, I came in as the taxonomist from the Department of Life Sciences and the Herbarium, right? So this is a photograph of the three of us. That's Dr. Clement on your left, myself, and Dr. Seaforth. We're the three of us involved with this study. And as a result of that, we published that study on an ethnobotanical survey of medicinal plants in Trinidad, and it is available online and open access. My talk will be basically on what we published in that paper. Okay, so the objectives of that study was to determine the most common ailments treated with herbal remedies, identify the plants used to treat these common ailments, and how they used it and the mode of preparation, and to determine which of these plants met a 20% citation for the purposes as regard as significant according to the TrameL criteria. So we use a Caribbean-based methodology for doing this. Then we will access the literature regarding the pharmacological evidence that could support this traditional use of these popular, or what we call significant plants. Right, so I'll tell you what is TrameL, because we were part of this network. TrameL is a non-governmental network established in the Caribbean basin since 1982, and you can get them online as well. The goal of that TrameL program was to document Caribbean folklore knowledge of herbal medicine for the preservation of home remedy knowledge. So the thinking is that if these plants are valid, it could be used in primary health care. Right? And secondly, to produce a Caribbean pharmacopoeia. And this Caribbean pharmacopoeia is available on their website, and every 4 or 5 years or 7 years, it is updated. Okay. The production of the Caribbean pharmacopoeia and then the network is administered from Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic. So the TrameL questionnaire is a standard protocol used throughout the Caribbean as the primary data collecting tool in face-to-face interviews with respondents following their verbal consent. So we must get consent before we start any interview. The questionnaire is very simple in design, and respondents were asked to describe the complaint, the plants or the plant parts they use, the preparation, describe it, and any precautions and contradiction with respect to children. The questionnaire did not collect demographic details such as ethnicity, sex, age, income, religion, etc. And TrameL defines, and if you want to see the questionnaire, you can go online, and as I said, the paper is free access, and you can see the questions that were posed in the questionnaire. So TrameL defined a remedy with significant or popular use as the combination of plant species, plant parts, or form of the preparation that is identified by at least 20% or more of the study population as primary treatment resource for a given ailment. Okay, so we have a benchmark to work with here, right? So the methodology, a total, and this is related to us, a total of 450 households from 50 rural communities were interviewed, and we use the TrameL questionnaire for data collecting. We would ask the remedy formulation, we would obtain that from the informant, and then we collected voucher specimens from each informant, and this was collected and identified at the herbarium. And then we would apply the TrameL methodology to see all the things that we're getting, where we got 20% a plant would be considered. So before we started the project, we did a pilot study to see if it was really worthwhile doing a national survey. The first conduct, the pilot project, identified the most common. So the first thing we wanted to do was identify the most common ailment where medicinal plants were used. The data collected from that pilot project informed the national survey. This was conducted randomly, selected rural communities around Trinidad. Right? Now, 200 communities qualified for selection as a rural community. And how did we define a rural community? As having a population of less than 1,500 inhabitants, limited access to amenities, particularly healthcare services, and the name of the community was written. And how we did it, we put the name of these 200 communities in a standardized sheet of paper, and then pulled it out and selected from that at random. And for each household, the individual with the most knowledge about herbal medicine was interviewed. So the top 10 ailments most commonly treated with herbal remedies were then selected for the full range of ailments recorded from all the informants. Okay, so this is a population census map of Trinidad in 2011. You can see where the population density is, the dark spots, and all the little circles would be the rural areas. Okay, so I think our criteria for using rural communities was well selected there. So we therefore assume that people living in these rural agricultural communities with restricted access to transportation and healthcare facilities would be mostly to retain more traditional knowledge and more than likely to use herbal remedies rather than those in urban areas. So that's why we didn't include the urban areas. The assumption is supported by other studies, and hence the rationale for focusing our survey on these communities. Right? So the top 10 ailments that emerged from the pilot project were cough and cold, stoppage of water, kidney stones, diabetes, colon cancer, asthma, womb infection, afterbirth, hypertension, and fever. So those were the top 10 that emerged from the study. So when you break them down into groups, you had herbal remedies used for upper respiratory tracts. You had one group there. You had herbal remedies used for the gastrourinary tract grouping. Then you had herbal remedies for chronic diseases and a whole range of herbal remedies for cooling and cleansing and fever. So how many of you still maintain this idea of cooling? Can we have a little show of hands if you could see anybody? Right. So yeah. So that intergenerational knowledge is not passed on or even or applied. So do people here still think they have to drink cooling or cleansing? Yes. Right. Right, cleansing. So the cleansing, cooling. So we have somebody waving in the back there to confirm they do cleansing. So that's good that we have some traditional practices going on, right? So the number of rural communities random selected using the same method that we used the pilot. Remember, we found 200, then we selected a pilot project, and then out of that 200, we did a random sample and picked out 50, and you saw the 50 on that map, right? The number of households randomly selected from the various communities to be interviewed was about 450. The number of questioners we had was 1,590. The number of voucher specimens collected from informants and brought to the herbarium for processing, identification, and databasing, 1,054. Right? So then now we had single plant remedies. Either they would be used as infusion or decoction, and I'll explain what's the difference between those two just now. So we did documented 917. The number of species used in formulation of remedies, 96 species. The number of plant families represented 43 plant families. And the major plant families they came from was Asteraceae, those were what we call composite in those days, Lamiaceae, Fabaceae with all your legumes grouping, Verbenaceae, and Poaceae would be your grasses. Right? So look at some of the species with the most citation, either for single and or multiple use. And some of you will know some of these. Leonidas nipetifolia, chandelier bush. How many of you drank chandelier bush? Right? Neurolina lobata, Zebra peak. I had Zebra peak. Yeah, anybody else? Right. Yeah. Cymbopogon, Citrus fever grass. Yes. Yeah. Momodica charantia, Kariley bush. Yes. Kariley bush, right? Stachytophyta jamaicensis, Bevanti, right? And notice what they're coming again, this cooling and cleansing and fever. Gomphrena globosa, which is the bachelor buttons. Many of us grew that as ornamental plants in our garden. Cucuma longa, good old hardy or turmeric or saffron is not really yeah, turmeric is really what it is. Saffron is a completely different plant. In fact, it's one of the most expensive spices in the world, all right? Senna occidentalis, wild coffee, and Senna alata. I think Dan has a specimen of a Senna here in his collection. Yes, Dan? Yeah? Right, so that is commercial. Yeah. Senna oxidans, Senna, citrus lemon, of course lemon, and Tonfortia, which is what they call jiggerbush, cooling and cleansing. Okay. Tonfortia, it is they call it jiggerbush, but it's a plant with very fuzzy, fairy. The leaves are a bit hairy with the white flowers. Yeah, yeah. I'm sure some of you know jiggerbush. You have a specimen of, you didn't bring jiggerbush. Yeah, yeah. Right. So this is what the samples, what we call voucher specimen that we actually collected, and we made sure we kept a sample from the whole survey. Okay, and we had to have that in order to publish the paper, because they will not just accept these IDs by just by word of mouth or just documented. We had to have proof that we. So, and you can see now the distribution of each plant. So you see how widespread nipetifolia is. You notice that is chandelier. You see chandelier, compare it to this one here. the Gomphrena globosa. Gomphrena is more the southern, central south people tend to have it. And I suppose it started off mainly as an ornamental plant in their garden. All right. So here's our cucuma longa, which is your hardy. And look at where hardy is more commonly used. What do you think is happening there? Think there's any, you think there's any demographic thing there? Yeah, notice Central South, hardy. Yeah. Yes, so, but again, we didn't take that kind of data, yeah, but just looking at the map and our knowledge of how the population demographics, we could see that trend inside there. Senna occidentalis, again, look at how it's a little bit more uncentral, but that is probably influenced by the availability of the plant, yeah? So Dan could tell us, where do you find most Senna occidentalis growing? Hmm? No, not the commercial one. That's a different species altogether. That commercial one, that's a different species to what we have here. Yeah? You tend to find these more in wet areas, Dan? So where you have wet areas and rivers and that, you tend to find that plant growing. Yes, yes. Yeah, yeah. That's right. Yeah. Right. So here we have Cymbopogon treacherus. Most people probably have fever grass and growing in their garden. Yes. Yeah. And Neuralina lobata. How many anybody growing Zebra Peak? Yeah. Zebra Peak, yeah. Yeah. So again, you see how fairly widespread. But funnily enough, Northeast Trinidad didn't have too many informants on Zebra Peak. Citrus, lemon, of course. And look at where lemon again. And you notice some of these areas kind of bordering on the populated areas as well. Where some of this is happening because, I mean, we're a small island. Right? So just to show you what these plants really look like, you can recognize chandelier. And it's interesting, we did an exhibition at the Green Market before COVID, and we had a sample of this chandelier on display. And this guy came to me and said to me, I have to tell you that I had a terrible cough and cold. I took all kinds of antibiotics. I took all kinds of cough medicine. It wouldn't go. I went to my mother's garden, boiled some chandelier, and I have no more cough and cold. So this is just an anecdotal reference. And so he had to tell me that that plant really works, you know. Okay, I am not recommending anything. Disclaimer here, okay? So I have a disclaimer. Disclaimer, I am not recommending. I am just giving information, okay? So, yeah. I think they just boil everything. I think they boil the whole plant. Yeah. Who use chandelier? How you use it? The whole thing, yeah, yeah. The whole thing they boil it, yeah. Yeah, and I'll get that right. So there is the hardy saffron. Of course, that is it's an undergrown rhizome. It's not as a botanist. What we get as hardy is not the root. It is an underground stem, right? It's called a rhizome. Similarly, a ginger, it's an underground stem. It's not the root, okay? So this is hardy, they would be using that. And then they have your wild coffee, senna, lemon. This is zebra peak, you're familiar with it? And it is lemon red. Yeah, that is zebra peak. It's a composite related to daisies and that sort of group of plants, yeah? Right, so we talk about concoction and infusion. So the definition is, it is a method of extracting by boiling. Remember we just said about the chandelier. So you'll make a decoction with the chandelier, you'll boil it. So that will dissolve the chemicals and the materials which is in it. And it will include the whole plant, or it may just be the root, depending on what species that they're using. An infusion is the process of extracting the chemical components, flavors from the plant's material in a solvent, such as water, oil, alcohol. and then you allow it to, the material to remain and be suspended. And the solvent is also called, and this process, people are familiar with your steeping. You remember somebody say, you steep your tea, you pour the water in, and you just leave it there. So that is what you would call an infusion, right? So it's that process is also referred to as an infusion. So let me see. Right? So upper respiratory tract. So we had 279 respondents. 37 plant species were identified that people say they use for that. But 30% citations we had for this chandelier. So that will, according to our TrameL benchmark or cutoff point, chandelier bush will be a TrameL approved plant. I still am not recommending. You will have to look at yourself, right? And not taking chances, right? Right. Right. So when we look at stoppage of water in men, that what we term in the medical language is that benign prostate hypertrophy in women, probably uterine fibroid. When they talk about sexually transmitted diseases, would be like chlamydia and gonorrhea. So you would see how people were responding to this grouping. 46 for kidney stones, so womb infection will fall under that group. When people talk about kidney stones, the sort of medical term would be respondents would be, and you would see there 15, the different plants that were used. So in the case of stoppage of water, we had 39 respondents, 17 species of plants. Gomphrena, which is the bachelor button, 43%, so it will be a TrameL approved plant, okay? For womb infection, we had 43 respondents, 24 species of plants. Look at what turned up, Momordica charantia, which is Caraili, okay? But it didn't qualify because only 16% of every citation we had for that, not TrameL approved. Kidney stones, 46 respondents, 15 species of plants, citrus, 19.6%. It would be TrameL approved. So we safe to use lemon, but whether it is work with kidney stones, I don't know. You'll have to have that thing. And then after birth, the expulsion of the placenta following childbirth. So there's still this cultural belief that not all of the placenta is expelled during childbirth or after childbirth. So there's this belief that you need to have it done. And therefore, we had 38 respondents, 8 species, Cucuma longa, 44% thing. Senna, we had Occidental, 21%. So those two plants came out as a TrameL approved, okay? So here's some actual pictures of what they look like, the bachelor button, kidney stones, your lemon, your afterbirth, 44% with your cucuma, your tumor, your hardy, and then we had the senna just about made it there, all right? Okay, so herbal remedies for chronic diseases, diabetes, and hypertension. We had 43 respondents, 24 species. Look at, so what you're seeing is sometimes one species may be used for more than one ailment, okay? So you're seeing here, Caraili turning up again, but it just fell under the 16%, so they would not consider this valid for hypertension or diabetes. For diabetes, we had 67 citations, and you had different species, Catharanthus roseus, which is known as periwinkle. We had Momordica charantia again, you see how it's coming back. And then we had Azadirachta indica, which is known as neem, right? None of these qualified for purposes of for diabetes in the TrameL criterion. However,
No.
Periwinkle is very well commercialized as a valid drug called vincrestine. And vincrestine is used for childhood leukemia. Okay, so um, periwinkle originated from Madagascar. So sometimes it's called the Madagascan periwinkle. So to produce that at a commercial level for medicinal purposes, you've got to grow this on a huge scale to extract vincrestine. So that's the active ingredient that is actually come out from herbal traditional medicine. And then here we have a sample of what neem looks like. Dan, did you have neem here in your group, in specimen? That neem. And you have so neem, yes, yeah. Dan has a sample of neem there. Again, neem is not a native species; it's an introduced species. Right. So hypertension now. There we had 100 citations, 28 plants. The most commonly used plant, Atocarpus altilis. What is Atocarpus altilis? What your breadfruit. But what's interesting, they use the yellowing leaves, right? This is the traditional stuff. They use the yellowing leaves. So when the leaves turn yellow, this is what they use to make an infusion or a decoction, right? But it did not really qualify in the TrameL citation or bench criteria. Similarly, Tambran, it's 11 citation, 11%. Again, it wasn't qualified as being effective. But we know Tambran, again, this is anecdotal, but I know of one case of people using Tambran leaves for diarrhea. Okay, again, that's not from our traditional survey, but this is from another experience. And if you and you know, if you eat enough Tambran, it is a laxative, right? So Tambran is a well-known laxative. Right. So herbal remedies for cooling. This was an interesting thing, this whole concept of cooling and fever. We had 194 persons. They used 38 different plant species, and 5 plants accounted for a significant of 59% of citation. And these were Stachytophyta jamaicensis, which is what the bevan, we have a sample there. Then we have Senna alata, the Carilli again came back up, and Tonfortia, which was the jiggerbush, and Peperomia pellucida. I'm sure everybody knows what Peperomia pellucida looks like. You'll see it now. So here we go. There's your pepper. Everybody know that? Shining bush. And how we remember it in school. We put it in some water with ink and to see the vascular system inside it, yeah? So peperonia, cooling. This is your Tonfortia hirsutisima. It has a white flower and the leaves are very hairy when you touch it. Agreed, Dan? Yeah? And then you have the Senna alata, and then we have here the Stachytophyta jamaicensis. Now this plant is very interesting, this beve. I once had a nurse from Mount Hope who wanted some information about beve. And the reason why she came to find out what is the botanical name for this plant, a lot of women, after they've had children, they would make a tea with this to improve breastfeeding, milk production. Right. And so she wanted to do some studies on it. So, but in our survey, that didn't turn up at all. So it may have turned up, but it didn't come up as one of the top 10. So this is this, and again, you see what in our survey, it came in as cooling and cleansing. So, you know, while you do your cooling and cleansing after birth, you get that additional value. Yes, yeah.
And there's 4 different types of this thing. The same plant here and bottom there.
Bovin, yeah. Yeah, but we have 3 species. Yeah, Stachytophyta jamaicensis, Stachytophyta cayennensis.
All the different ones to see
That is why when we did this survey, we collected every single plant. So if we went to 10 homes and each one told us they use this weather, we will make a specimen from it to be sure that we will get in the same species throughout. The other thing too, why we do it, some people, there are different common names for the same plant. So jiggerbush is not only Tonfortia, there are other plants that we call jiggerbush as well. So that's why we took voucher specimens from everybody, even though it meant to be sure that we are getting a consistency when we ID the plants. Yeah. So fever, there were 98 citations, 21 plant species being identified. 2 plants with the most citation, Cymbopogon, this is your fever grass. Yeah. 30 out of it, so it approved. Neuralina lobata again, Zebra Peak, 46 approved. So general comments is single plant remedies were presented in order to link individual plants with pharmacological evidence to support the traditional use. Mixtures were also recorded and may contain from 2 to 8 plants plus additional ingredients, olive oil, honey, soft candle, salt, but it was difficult to determine which plant was responsible for the biological activities. So we didn't tackle multiple mixtures, right, for obvious reasons. And there were some cases, in addition to plants, they had all kinds of animals in it too. Yeah, I remember seeing one concoction from, I think, they had scorpion in it. Yeah.
What?
Yeah, so some of these concoctions will even have animals found. There's one interesting one that didn't turn up in the survey, but it was a small sample, was Aristolochia rugosa, what they call treff. Everybody heard about treff?
Mm.
No, you know, if you go to the market in Port of Spain there and you ask for treff, you will be looked at very funny. Why? No, well, why is it not popular? No, it's a secret. Treff, because of the leaves are trifoliate, trefoil. Yeah, yeah. Treff, yeah. If you go to these herbal people and you see treff or ask for them, they're extremely cautious about telling you about it. Why? They use it as an abortifacient for abortion.
Oh, right.
So they are very secretive about it. Yeah. And I saw in one situation when they make the decoction, it included the caterpillar that feeds on it, the butterfly that it's a food plant for. When that butterfly, that caterpillar comes out, it is included in the mixture. No, that didn't turn up in this survey, but these are some of the additional information I have received in my career as a taxonomist, botanist in the herbarium, right? So these single plant remedies were the what we focused on in this study, right? So what's the significance of our study? This is the first systematic ethnobotanical study done for Trinidad, and you were asking me about Tobago. Before you ask me, we did one for Tobago a long time ago for TrameL, right? But we never had a really systematic one for Trinidad. Right? So, and we wanted to determine the extent of traditional use of medicinal plants throughout several rural communities on the island. It covered 50 communities. It was a large sample size. We used the valid TrameL survey. Voucher specimens preserved and deposited in Trinidad Herbarium. We also send duplicates to Santo Domingo as well, because we are a partner with them. So if you go on the TrameL website and you look for any plant, you will see some of the specimens from Trinidad in their collection as well. Yeah. So we gathered a wealth of information, and all the questionnaires, they were all database. So there's a lot of information on that database. I'm sure you could analyze even more information from that. We gathered a wealth of information, example methods of preparation, mode, and frequency of administration, right? And when we compared it to previous studies on herbal medicine, we had an anthropological study by Wong in the 70s, 1976, which he did. He was from Harvard University, and he did a single community. He looked at blanchissaires back in the 70s, and he was doing his PhD at the time. And he had 186 species of medicinal plants, 70 villagers he interacted with, 52 species were in keeping with our study. So, but in his study, none of these turned up for kidney stones or asthma. But you can get Wong's paper online as well. Yeah. Seaford and Edna, they did a study in 1983 and went to 18 rural communities, 78 plants identified, 28 plants shared in common with our survey. But in their study, nothing turned up for kidney stones, stoppage of water, afterbirth, urinary and diabetes. There was a bit of focus on that. And about 24 plants were used for cooling. And 11 of those plants were in common with our survey. So there's some overlap and a bit of continuity that we see trends still persisting even in the 21st century, right? All right. So the total number of species used as a single remedy, 94 species. The total number of native species, 52%. So half of those plants were native, and just a little under half were exotic species. For example, the exotics would be your hardy, the neem, what again? The lemon, what else? So yeah, I come from my head right now. Senior movement. Kariley, yes. No, bovine is native. Bachelor button is another exotic. Kariley is introduced. Introduced. Yeah. Zabapik is native. Zabapik native. All right. So the total number of herbs equals life form. So the most type of, when we say life form, whether it's a herb, a vine, a tree, a shrub or something, herbs were the most common life form. And it would make sense because herbs are easy, they are annuals, they grow fast, their life cycle is very short, so they'll be quickly available. Number of shrubs, 15. A shrub will be like your sene and stuff like that. Trees, we only had 6 trees, and that will be not surprising. Neem would be one of them indigenous. And forget what are the other 5 trees. Yeah, breadfruit, tambran, again exotics. I think mango turned up as well, but it didn't fall into the 20% cutoff for us. Okay. Climbers 6. Well, we saw Dan say in the Tonfortia, correct, Dan?
Yeah.
All right. And number of epiphytes, only 1. And that was just, I think, the Ripsalis. Okay. That's the old man beard, all right. And total number of hemiepteryte was things like those, what we call love vine and stuff like that. 1. People familiar with love vine? Yeah. Well, that didn't turn up in our survey, but it turned up when in Seafort and their work, love vine, they turned up in that study. Yeah. So conclusion, we achieved our objectives and identified medicinal plants used for most common ailments across a wide cross-section of rural communities in Trinidad. These findings add to a body of work previously done on the island and should provide a platform for more focused surveys in the future. Our survey showed significant retention of traditional knowledge of medicinal plants in rural Trinidad. More interestingly, a large remnant of medico-cultural concepts such as cooling, cleanser, and that will come back from the ancient time when we talked about the hot and cold. You know, you have hot and cold in other traditions. Long before we had a thermometer, people would measure physiological changes by being hot or cold. So you would find that cooling cleanser would have that sort of origin. After birth, stoppage of water, womb infection, all of these things still persist in the lexicon of the rural population. So although the scientific literature showed that some of the cited plants possess antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, and related pharmacological activities in laboratory study, these results must be taken with caution until clinical trials are conducted to establish safety and efficacy in Trinidad and Tobago. Because clinical trials, you have to do a lot of ethical and consent and all that sort of thing. And that is something that we get stumped with in the Caribbean, is to do the clinical trials because of the ethics involved with it, right? So I thought, let me slide in here some plants that we didn't come up in our survey, but how other people and other parts of the world with the same plant we have here have been studied. Everybody know Mimosa pudica? Yes? Right. Some common names, Timari, sensitive plant, touch me not, da, da, da. In Senegal, the leaves are used to treat nephritis, which is any chronic inflammation of the kidney. In the Republic of the Congo, and these are papers that were cited from, the root of the plant is used to treat uterine cancer. Yeah. In India, the purple leaves are placed in cuts, cuts to stop bleeding. So they use it as hemorrhaging, and you just cut up and use it. And in the Philippines, the plant is used to treat anti-inflammatory conditions such as gout, asthma, rheumatism, because of its ability to inhibit inflammation. Oh, we missed out that thing, right? So here is a use of a native species that, and remember, plants don't know borders in some cases, right? So here's another Biden's Palosa. Everybody know this one. Yeah, railway daisy. Yeah. Again, that didn't turn up as an important one in our survey, but some of the common name, railway daisy, blackjack, Spanish needle. Foliage and flowers are steeped for a prickly heat and in cooling blood. Tea from all parts of the plant for worms. Juice from the leaves in water boiled and then cool to wash and in irritated or inflamed eyes. So it's used as an eye wash. Tea for flatulence, diuretic beverage made from all parts of the stomach. So, and it is one of the most important plants for butterflies. Chris?
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And you agreed with that, with that, okay? Right. Cynodon dactylon, a very common grass, right? Dube grass, and it's sometimes called Bahamas grass, Indian grass. This grass was found to have anti-diabetic, antioxidant properties. Dube grass is offered to the Hindu god, Lord Ganesh. So here is an example of plants going just beyond just its medicinal thing. I didn't go into all the other cultural uses of plants because that's another conversation all by itself, right? So not only as a part of daily worship, but during important festivals called Ganesh Utsav. So for the Hindu community, you're probably familiar with doob grass. Eh? I think they also used doob grass when they were making wattle and daub for houses. Yeah? Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I know. That is where problem comes in because dubgrass, there are more than one species called dubgrass, right? Yeah, and the other dubgrass I think is called Yeah. Yes, it's short and it's thicker and it's denser. Yeah, and it's, yeah. So again, this is why when we do our studies, the importance of having your botanical name and its ID band. So again, dubgrass, I think is zoysia. I think it's a zoysia species is the other one. Yeah? Here's another one, Lantana camara. This is a poisonous plant in our thing, right? Some common names, sleeperweed, lantana, wild sage. This is a butterfly plant. Yes, Chris, agreed? Yeah. The flowers attract butterflies, like this one that we see here. Lantana oil is used in the treatment of skin itches and as an antiseptic for wounds and externally for leprosy and scabies. Okay. In folk remedies, extract is used for the treatment of chickenpox, measles, asthma, ulcers, swellings, eczemas, a lot of dermatitis and skin problems, high blood pressure. So you see this is quite, and this is from a range of other places, okay? And here is a sample of lantana oil. And here it is being used for a dermatitis problem here, right? So again, I don't think I've ever seen lantana oil on our market or anything like that, but it may be, I'm sure if you go on Amazon, you might find it, yeah? Yeah. And all the necessary thing here and standardize and et cetera, right? And there'd be a whole dossier profiling on it, okay? And good old Peperomia pellucida, shining bush, yeah, man-to-man, silver bush. So medicinal uses for the plant has been used for treating abdominal pain, abscesses, acne, boils, colic, fatty, tiredness, gout, a whole shebang, almost a panacea. Yeah. It is also eaten fresh for sore throat. Yeah. Okay. So again, I am not recommending. This is just information. Just this disclaimer. All right. All right. And everybody knows good old shadow benny. Yeah. Common name, shadow benny, bandania in Trinidad. The entire plant shows anti-inflammatory and analgesic effects and has been used for convulsion, malaria, fever, pneumonia, and epilepsy. The leaves are used as a tea for diabetes, constipation, the flu, menstrual pain, vomiting in children for the common cold, crushed in the air to treat pain, and also used for arthritis. Economically, the leaves are harvested and used as a seasoning in various condiments. Yeah, so we know that, right? And I have to acknowledge that information came from, I ran an internship program for 10 years with the University of Southern Caribbean. And these students, at the end of the internship, I had a seminar and I asked the student to select a plant that they're interested in and do all the research you can find and present it. And these are some of the students who presented some of that research that they did. Yeah, so I have to say that was an excellent program when I was there. And the students absolutely enjoyed finding out all this stuff about these plants. And then, of course, the herbarium staff played a big role in this project. And then the collaborators included three field assistants, researchers, Steve, Alice, and Mr. Mark. Terry Sampson did the photography, and Hamish Asmat did the GPS maps for us. Yeah. And thank you. And anybody recognize this plant? Well, you have the Boalagli, Rukunjab, Ryanea species. This plant was actually used for controlling the shoot borer in cornfields. And sometime in the 80s, again, subject to correction, they were shipping out from our forest in the northern range, sea and land containers full of this plant. It's an understory plant, right? For using in the cornfields for the shoot borer in the States. And we found an article called the New Farmer, and I had a copy of it in here. And this guy was had an arrangement with somebody over here in Blanchissel area, shipping this out by the container full. And then he was selling it, and this was all the organic farming started over there. $7 a pound for the crushed material. And we tried to get students to do some work to look at the biology of this plant, because it's very difficult. It produces extremely fine seeds. The seeds are almost microscopic. And I actually had a lab in the US write me and ask me to send samples of these seeds. They will try to grow it in their lab. And I said, no way. If we can't grow it in our lab and work on our thing, I'm not sending this away. Yeah. And I understand it is also may have beta blockers in it for heart problems. So is and it was shipped out a lot in the early 1900s or so as an insecticide. Rotenone is what comes from that, right? So that ends my talk. Thank you.